We are the Multiscalar team, and we are focusing on the Great Plains region. Our design framework consists of two major flooding events: solar storm flooding and polarity reversal. Both of these can cause flooding at a catastrophic level. If this were to happen, approximately 264 million people will be displaced and urged to relocate in the Midwestern region. Indigenous reservations comprise 56.2 million acres of land in the United States. Many of these cultural lands have high poverty rates, poor health care, and low quality of education. It is critical to create all inclusive evacuation and relocation hubs. Selecting areas for Job Corps sites that are in close proximity to these native lands will increase the flow of revenue and create jobs for millions of people that are displaced. During the geodesign network and continental collaboration, these teams selected areas that would be best for habitat preservation and suitability for site development. As the data was compiled, we have taken into account the flooding disasters and narrowed down to feasible options. With this information, we have selected evacuation sites and relocation cities that would be at a high enough elevation that they would be minimally impacted by the flooding events and in close proximity to Job Corps sites, evacuation routes, military bases, and spaceports, which would aid in our emergency evacuation if the flooding were to worsen beyond this level.
At the top is the data we analyzed for the placement of our evacuation and relocation hubs. Starting from the left is the major flooding event, which is solar storm and polar reversal flooding. Below that is a consensus for habitat preservation for monarch butterflies from the geodesign games. Moving on is the major rivers in Texas, which will be used as evacuation routes for the occurrence of solar storm and polar reversal flooding. The last infograph shows the population for the areas we are focusing on. This brings us to the regional consensus, which shows where and which cities are going to be the evacuation centers and relocation cities, and where the habitat preservation is in relation to everything just stated. To summarize it more, the next map shows the connection between the relocation and evacuation hubs by high-speed rail lines. These graphs illustrate the areas that will be affected by the flooding and where the habitat preservation and evacuation routes will be, which help determine the locations for the evacuation and relocation cities. Next is the phasing. Phase 1, to be completed by 2025, is establishing 35.3 million acres of habitat preservation and mapping out the evacuation routes. Phase 2, to be completed by 2050, is moving to the evacuation hub, which is Mesa, Colorado, and establishing another 35.3 million acres of habitat preservation. The evacuation hub will hold around 1 million people, and the rail lines connecting to the city is 324 miles. Phase 3 is transferring to the relocation hub, which is Lake Huron, New Mexico, and establishing the remaining 35.3 million acres of land to total 106 million acres of habitat preservation. The relocation hub will hold 50,000 people, and the rail lines connecting to these cities are 518 miles. The phasing plans break down the students of our framework for the multiscalar team as a whole.
The second portion of this project is our proposed archaeological evacuation center. This center serves as a short-term inclusive transitional hub to bridge the gap between emergency evacuations and our permanent relocation city. Ideally, refugees will stay at our evacuation center for less than 3 months before moving to their permanent relocation site. The evacuation center is located in Mesa County, Colorado. When choosing a suitable site, it was imperative to select a site outside of the polar reversal and solar flooding areas, while keeping in mind areas that are more vulnerable to solar storms. This led to the selection of Colorado since it was close to a military base and space hub. We analyzed the structure and road suitability in addition to flooding and erosion vulnerability. After combining these criteria, we found the ideal site location in Grand Junction, Colorado, right off the Colorado River.
When designing our evacuation center, we wanted it to be completely self-sufficient and sustainable while meeting the needs of the vulnerable people being brought to the site. After extensive research on creating a self-sufficient site, we proposed a prototype toolkit broken down into the objectives of renewable energy, human infrastructure, essential nutrition, and transportation. Our site plan utilizes each of these prototypes to create an inclusive transitional hub. Our site includes 6 housing pods with a central medical hub and transportation hub connected by elevated walkways and an autonomous rail line. The medical hub is located in the center of our campus in order to ensure equal access from all areas. Traditionally, people at the socioeconomic bottoms without the financial resources to evacuate or relocate are hit the hardest in emergency events such as large-scale flooding. We included a public transportation system and helicopter system to efficiently serve those who cannot evacuate or relocate on their own. We realized that there will be a lot of trauma occurring before the occupants get to our hub, so we wanted to provide extensive green spaces connecting all the housing pods to the medical hub to help with mental health and PTSD. Phase 1 can be immediately implemented with a transportation hub, 2 housing pods, and 1 green roof, and the medical hub with elevated walkways connecting them all. Phase 1 has a holding capacity of 200,000 people. By phase 2, there will be an additional 2 housing pods and 2 green roofs, leading to a total holding capacity of 400,000 people. The final phase will add the last 2 housing pods and 2 green roofs and an autonomous rail line connecting all housing pods with the transportation hub with a total capacity of 600,000 people.
Our wind turbine farm consists of 40 turbines and will produce about 263 million kilowatt hours annually. With this implementation, we will reduce our site's carbon emissions by 120,000 tons annually. We are also adding 424,000 square feet of solar panels that can produce about 9,636,000 kilowatt hours annually. The use of solar panels will yield a 99% decrease in carbon emission compared to traditional electricity. On-site water harvesting from our green roof has the capacity to yield about 26 million gallons a year and will be used in our vertical farms for food production. Our modular housing pods and circular layout is intended to promote inclusivity and familiarity. Additionally, in the event of a pod being compromised, we can easily move refugees to another pod in the campus using the interwoven walks and corridors. This allows us to isolate and adapt to worst-case solar storm scenarios. To the right, we displayed some perspectives of our prototypes, such as the aircraft landing pads on top of our transportation hub, the green roofs, and the vertical aeroponic farming structures.
Scalar City, a mobile self-sufficient destination. Our task focus on creating a place that can perform well in a sea level rise and or solar storm. To come up with the most suitable place, we as a group collected specific data reflecting the general analysis map, where we put together areas that will be affected by the previous mentioned catastrophic events. After analyzing and pursuing a geographic area that will have the conditions such as, but not limited to water lake, mountainous elevated region, easy access to a river, and more importantly, not colonized to avoid property displacement. Heron Lake, situated at Harbaba County, New Mexico, was the better alternative. Heron Lake is surrounded by hilly terrain and its size is 2 by 2.5 miles, 35 miles of the shoreline, and its depth is range between 100 and 200 feet at the deepest part. Then we start doodling ideas about the design that could serve as a self-sufficient place where people can freely and comfortably coexist with the natural environment while making use of technological features that could make people's lives more comfortable. As you notice, we give the design a spherical shape with buildings going along the edges and vertical hydroponic system on every single one of them. For food production purpose, we purposefully designed to float in the water with turbines to move around, and furthermore with a dome forming thus a closed loop system. Once we have all the ideas in place, we design the master plan, always with the idea of create a self-sustainable place, generate jobs while living in the arc, promote better health for people while interacting with the natural environment, and better yet, to reduce carbon emission by making use of natural resources such as the sunlight and ocean water for electricity purpose. We're proposing to build 3 arcs evenly spaced within the lake. In the axonometric analysis, we can see the different components that makes this city possible. Starting from the bottom is Flores, lightweight material where also the fresh water for human consumption and daily use will be stored. In the second layer, we have the organic part that will make the green possible within the prototype. In the third layer, building composition as well as the elevated wall connection between them. and the hydroponic vertical farming in the back of each building. In the 4th layer, there is the space shuttle set in the back of the four main buildings in the city that are intended to serve as evacuation sources to go to the space, moon or Mars in case the light is no longer possible in the air. And last layer, layer 5, the magnesium dome frame and is covered with anti-reflex coat solar panel that will protect from solar radiation while storing the energy. Here, we quickly want to make emphasis on the carrying capacity of the ARC City. A neighborhood can hold up to 2,000 people. One single ARC can hold up to 1,600 people, and the city composed by the 3 ARCs can hold up to 50,000 people. You can see in the section how they are going to be distributed within the lake and the depth of the lake, as well as the hilly terrain with the mesa behind it. When it comes to the phases, we broke them up into 3 phases. The first one build the terrain facilities around the lake and offer the city as a tourism destination while raising revenue to build the two leftover prototype. In phase 2, we are aiming to choose suitable locations extending beyond the coastal zones. And in phase 3, we will be placing and locating prototypes to their adequate locations.
Here we display some detailed perspective images of the prototype that shows some of the different elements within it, such as green walls, green space, recreational area, helipads, space shuttles, and much more. This graphic was created to display a general analysis of the prototype and the different systems and how they work. The prototype features a climate-controlled glass and solar energy storage system, a system that transforms water into energy and fresh water, and a very green system in which the soil plays an important role in. The amphibious city has a large hydroponic farming system that uses soilless methods to produce food for consumption. This hydroponic farming system is located on the back side of each of the skyscrapers. Within the prototype, there are many different transportation methods also, such as walking, delivery drones, submersible boats, flying taxis, and water taxis. Lastly, we display our functional recycling system that plays a huge role in our closed loop system that we are proposing, where all of the waste is put to use. Sewage is put in an anaerobic system and goes through an algae filtration. Recyclables are put into an exchange hub and collection systems, and organic waste is turned into compost for fertilization and also used in the hydroponic farming systems. By doing this, waste within the amphibious city is reduced by up to 70%.